Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Gabriella Taylor, who's a relationship specialist, minister, and coach who's going to talk to us. I'm so excited. You guys have heard my smart girl syndrome and, how these good, kind, loving, giving women end up in these really yucky relationships. And we're going to talk about why that happens. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm happy to be here. Lovely to be here.
Yes, we were talking about our matching hair. Those of you who are like in the podcast and not listening to the video, you're already missing out because we both have fabulous hair that we're bringing to the table today, as well as a fabulous conversation.
Thank you, genetics.
Thank you, genetics. Thank you, humidity. Exactly. Well, Gabriella, why do you love this topic? What have you seen in women that draw you to really great women having trouble with relationships? What's happening?
I mean, gosh, why do I love it? I love it because, for one, I lived it. So much of my history was one of being incredibly aware. I had a background where there was a lot of abuse and trauma. So my baseline was challenging, but I had a spiritual awakening almost 30 years ago. So my eyes have been open for a long time. And I dove right into doing my work, getting the trainings, doing the counseling, doing the therapy, getting my credentials, certifications up the wall.
Hold up. So you're saying if you want to heal, there's work to be done? Like there's not like a magic pill, or you can't just like drink a little special.
There is grace. There is grace. And we are these divine beings walking around in these human bodies that have an ego, that has a psychology, that has ways that we've been imprinted by life and programmed. So yeah, it's good to bring the light to the shadows, is how
I love that.
As to how we've been programmed. So the reason why I love it is because for a lot of my life, I had been, during a big portion of my life, I was having amazing success in my work, doing incredible things with people, really aware, really bright, but behind closed doors, for me in my relationships with men, I was a hot mess, and I couldn't reconcile why the me that showed up in my life with my clients, with my friends, with my family, insightful and wise, why, like, where did she go when it came to emotional upset that came up with men? So the reason why I love it so much is that inside of me, I figured out I called it a laboratory of love. I created a year-long research project for myself back in 2005, where I led myself through this laboratory of love, where, because I was a facilitator and my background was psychology, I was like, okay, I'm going to research my experience, my dating experience. And so over that year, I really my eyes opened up so much to all of the things that I was doing and the ways that I was behaving and the ways that I was thinking and relating to romantic relationship, that were completely inconsistent with who I was as a wise, connected, aware woman. So that completely blew my mind, and I knew I was onto something. So then I created programs and curriculum, as here we are 16 years later, about that. So that's why I love it. It's been my path, and also at this point, I've walked thousands of women through it. So
what do you do? Like, what were you doing wrong when you went into those relationships and didn't bring your best self in?
Oh my gosh. The first thing that I was doing wrong is I was completely leaving myself. I would go on a date, I'd be with a man, and I would start contorting. I call it pretzeling. Like, oh, how do I need to sit? How do I need to talk? What are the things? How much do I reveal about myself? How much do I withhold? Am I really honest if I'm not ready to have sex and he wants to have sex? Am I really honest with what I want emotionally or need emotionally? Am I really honest about what I'm looking for in a long-term relationship? No, not in any of those areas. It's like I would leave myself at the door, and it was suddenly, how can I be for you? How can I please you? How can I do or say or be what I think you want me to be, even if I wasn't that into him? So that is a huge thing that so many women struggle with.
I call it bringing in the representative. Right?
Yeah,
like
right.
You send in the representative. Yes.
Yes. So the representative was in full force, and I was back there like, where am I? Where'd I
go? Yeah. But when we think about, when you go on a guy, because the complaint is, they acted this way in the beginning, and then they turn into this person, usually within toxic relationships. And it's like, you don't want him bringing in the representative.
Mhm. And the reality is that we all are. Like there's the me and then there's the person that I'm dating and then we each have our personas, our self-images.
Yeah.
So there's a few of us at the on the date sitting across the dinner table. There's the me that I want you to see, there's the me I don't want you to know about, and then there's the
Uh-huh.
me deep down, my deepest self. And
So
same for him. He's got all those versions too.
so everybody's like in a polyamorous relationship without
Yes.
realizing it, right? It's
With
like,
self-images, with personas. Absolutely. I love it.
now we see why dating is so complicated, right? So what else did you notice that you're bringing that
So
didn't serve you?
so that was a big one. And then another one was I was agreeing to things that
Mm,
I wasn't comfortable with.
yeah.
So I was actually saying yes or agreeing or allowing things, walking around in shoes that gave me blisters and didn't speak up about it. And I actually just had a woman in one of my groups that talked about that too. I was
Mhm.
going to restaurants or places on dates that I wasn't comfortable with food that I didn't even like on the most minute level, like that's a simple level. But even in terms of the content of the interaction, if he leaned over to kiss me, I didn't know how to say no at that time. So I was agreeing to these things that just weren't right or real or honest for me.
Well, and we women tell themselves, and I'm sure I've told myself, well, it's not that big of a deal. I can just, push
Right.
myself aside and eat the
Right.
restaurant.
Yeah.
But then it
It
snowballs into really
accumulates.
big deals. Like,
Yes.
well, I have to choose my career based on his needs rather
Mhm.
than mine. Or
Mhm.
maybe you have a kid you don't want to have, or
Mhm.
don't have a kid you want to have, right? It turns
Yes.
into big things. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Because it's like it's a tendency and it's an inborn tendency that has been conditioned in most Western women in particular. And I've lived
Yeah.
all over the world in multiple 37 different countries. So I've had an experience of a lot of cultures, but specifically Western women. There's this deep conditioned impulse where we either acquiesce and we become passive and submissive, or we become overly dominant and demanding and like assertive and aggressive, right?
Yes.
And
The
neither of those
messy
work.
middle.
Yeah, neither of
Yeah.
those really work. Because
Curious as to why you think that happens in Western cultures
I'm
versus.
I think for one, the circumstances that we find ourselves within, they're different. If we look at for by and large for
Mhm,
most of
mhm.
us, and I've lived in Asia and Africa, and I've spent a lot of time in third world countries, they didn't have the luxury to be thinking about boundaries or,
Agree.
self-care. Like they're on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, by
Mhm,
and large, a lot of the population is more needing to focus on survival. And
mhm.
so, us as Westerners, we have the education, we have the resources, we have the capacity to reflect, we have the capacity to really think the higher thoughts, the loftier thoughts, because for a lot of us, and it's not true for all of us, but for a lot of us,
Mhm.
we do have the ability to explore the more deeper, meaningful questions and to look at the impact of how we are showing up in our lives and what we're attracting to us in our lives. So I think a lot of it is just based on the gifts that we've been given, the opportunities that we've been given
Yeah.
in our
Mhm.
culture.
Well, and two, thinking about especially some third world countries I've been in, and like been in, not like visited on a cruise ship.
Yeah,
Like what
yeah,
you're talking about, like,
like
in the
yeah.
family, yeah, in the family structure, is the mother is so important, right? Like in that where the base level needs are being focused on, mama's the one passing out the food, right?
Yeah,
So mama
yeah,
is really important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's different. It's degraded here. It's really
Yeah.
different. But if we also look at, to me, I kind of pan out and look at the big picture of how for the past 2000 plus years, we've lived in a world collectively that has been a masculine
Mhm.
dominant society. Not bad, not wrong, just out of balance, where we favored, linear processing, knowing, force, pressure, he or she who has the most power wins.
Mhm.
And so we're coming out of a time where there have been 2100 generations of our grandmothers
Yeah.
that lived under a masculine order where
Yeah.
our sensitivity, our tenderness, our kindness, our compassion was it had to be pushed down. It had to be tamped down. So I think there's actually something very profound that's happening. We might laugh that it's like, oh, going on a date and not going pee if you have to go pee, or not really ordering what you want to eat.
Sure.
But really, it's connected to this deep, profound systemic change that's happening on this planet right now, which is we as women, like we're coming into a whole new age and era of standing up inside of ourselves, in our softness, our tenderness, in our collaboration, in our compassion, in our creativity. So we're at the dawn of something profound, and relationships in particular are being called to be transformed, because for most of us, relationships are a source of emotional drama, stress, where we agonize. And what we're moving into, and you're married,
Yes.
I'm married. It's like, I don't know about you, but my relationship, yes, there's the shadow, and what it gives me, the strength and power that it gives me to go out into the world as a woman and to do my work, just having that feeling that, oh, he's got my back, my best interests are in mind. It is so profound. It gives us as women something to relax into, so we're actually stronger. So I find it to be an extraordinary conversation.
Well, and also that, just being able, you said something about strong and then soft, because I think so many times, like, women think their only option is to become that other side of like power, and I'm going to not be a doormat, not let anybody take advantage of me anymore. And it's like, whoa, don't bring the hammer unless there's a nail. Otherwise, you just come across as too much, or angry, frustrated, she who needs to be healed, and so I love that you said coming into our strength, but also there can be a softness to that. It doesn't have to be, I am woman, hear me roar, and that's not the only option to be your best self.
I've created a developmental model. It's kind of it's a graphic, but where it really maps the progression of the shadow feminine into the empowered feminine. And so in the developmental stages, like, we go from being acquiescent and suppressed, and then along the developmental scale, we all have to go through that hear me roar, like, who are you, don't you dare. But that's just a stage. We don't want to stop there. Like, that's not the point.
Yes. Thank you for being able to have that conversation. Thank you for being able to have that conversation.
It's so important, but it's not the final. It's not the end place.
I love that, in my work with toxic relationships, that's what I say about studying narcissism or studying toxic behaviors. It's like, it's a great starting point. It is so not the finish line, right? Like, that is so like just a place you go through. That's not the end. Because I see people get stuck in that, big time. So what else did you realize about your conscientious, beautiful, amazing, successful self that was, when you were going on dates?
I would say, at the heart of it all, of every relationship, is the relationship we're having with ourselves. And there was something about, we all have two selves. Like, there's the part of me, the part of you that is already awake, that's already aware, that's connected to our loving heart, that knows who we truly are in our clearest moments. It's where our joy comes from. It's where our generosity comes from. And we have a false self. It's the part of us that's forgotten. It's the part of us that thinks that we need to prove that we are what we've forgotten that we already are. It's the part of us that lives in a place of divisiveness or anger or judgment or separation. And so we're all walking around volleying these two relationships inside. So every relationship that we're having is a relationship with ourselves. So I would say the biggest thing that I learned above all is how to relate to my relationships as a sacred mirror, especially relationships with men. And I'm heterosexual, so that was the most, relevant, but this is applicable to anyone who loves. But to start to relate to relationship as a sacred mirror, it is reflecting something about me to me. And it's not necessarily a direct reflection. If this is a narcissist, doesn't mean I'm a narcissist. But let's say, because you mentioned it, if I'm calling somebody into my world that I feel is dominant or overpowering or dismissive of me, that's reflecting something about me where I've thought that I deserve it, or that I need to tolerate it, or that nothing else is possible, or I should just accept the crumbs. So I would say on the most profound level is like learning to decode You know, my triggers, my
Mm-hmm.
upsets, like when he would do this, what do I make it mean about me? You know, what does it
Mm-hmm.
bring up inside of me? And really learning how on ground zero, how to repair in myself and to clear through those judgments, release the resentments, clear through any um ideas about myself that are shameful or felt unworthy or undeserving. So to me, that's the most profound, pivotal thing that I've learned, and you know, have the privilege to share with others that are looking for that. It's really how to relate to the sacred mirror of relationship. It's always reflecting something to us.
And what I've noticed, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. What I've noticed is so many women, we get trained to solve other people's problems. It's like the woman who's like, oh, I'm so great at, giving advice, but I don't take my own advice, or within that shadow side and reflecting on ourselves, because it may not even be like a piece of like brokenness or like broken home or, codependency. It may not be that, but we get used to it's okay. We give ourselves permission to worry about other people's problems, our kids, our partner, our parents. But then it's like, okay, what about your own problems? And thinking about problems to solve, like your own life problems to solve to move you forward. Have you seen that where it's just kind of like really more comfortable focusing on being there for everyone else than
For sure. And I mean, I have great respect to not only the biological meaning of that, because biologically, back in cavewoman days, we needed to be attuned to the needs of the little babies or whatnot in order to ensure the survival of our species.
Yes.
You know, like we needed to feel if our child was sick, we needed to tune into, are they going to live or die? You know, so there's a biological mechanism in our 300 million year old brain that has not evolved at all, that is attuned to tracking the needs of others. Then we've been socialized. So psychologically, we've been socialized. Like good girls are pleasing. Good girls, do good things for others. Like you hear that where there's, very often people are prized for being selfless and for being
or being exhausted. I mean, too many women right now, it's like, it's a bragging, oh, I'm never sleeping. I'm never, this, I'm always, tired because I did all this. And it's like, whoa, when did that become a badge of honor?
Yeah.
And, that's one of the things I do honor about like the life coaching space and that world. You hardly ever hear life coaches brag about being tired because nobody wants an exhausted life coach, right? It's like, but it's something I learned, right? I was like, oh, these people who are trying to help and heal, it's not cool to be exhausted. Like it would be cool. I hate to use that word, but in the corporate world where that's like a badge of honor.
Right. Right. And think of it. I mean, it has masculine roots. It's like men coming back from the battle, their battle wounds. Like, look at how much they've done. And there's there's something to it. And that's what's shifting. So yes, I mean, I think that tendency is inherent in all of us. The tendency to be other oriented. And also because we have been socialized as women to think that our power comes from our ability to manage others' perception. Like if I can manage how you perceive me, am I pretty enough? Am I smart enough? Am I skinny enough? Look at the multi-billion-dollar beauty industry and diet industry.
Okay, let's just talk about that for just a second. Because I mean, like I had my nails done. I'm not against, I mean, my hair is a little crazy right now, but whatever. I was actually an ambassador for like a pageant. Like I did my first beauty pageant at 37 after 2 kids. Like I had never done anything like that before. And it was like, what's scary for me? Like I'm always telling other people to do scary things. Why not my first bathing suit competition after 2 9-pound babiys? Let's go with that. So that's what I did, right? So cool. I'm not like downing the beauty industry by any means. And they have taken over self-care in a way that's inappropriate, right? Because it's like, oh, self-care is getting your hair done. Self-care is getting your nails done. Self-care is and there's nothing wrong with any of these things. Self-care is shopping. Self-care is setting boundaries. Self-care is learning to be a better person. Self-care is finishing through all the things you said. Self-care is investing in coaching so the next year is better than the last year. Right?
Self-care is reflection.
Yes.
Time to self-reflect, to look within. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I thinking what am I thinking? Why am I holding back? Why am I being invisible? Why am I disappearing myself? Like self-care, I am so with you. It's gotten very exploited where they're different categories, but self-care is really slowing down
Yes.
to be with what's alive in our heart, whether it's grief or joy, but slowing down to meet ourselves where we're at. And it's not easy, because a lot of what we find is there's pain, there's hurt, there's things that we don't really want to touch. So it's easier to stay busy. It's easy to be focused on other people. Yet the juice and the reward, as we know, is by expanding our own capacity, our own threshold for intimacy, by our ability to be close to ourselves and connected to ourselves, let alone another. Because if I'm busy running around all the time, there is no way that I'm going to slow down for deep love.
When I say like tired isn't sexy. Like, I mean, it's just not, when people are talking about after divorce or something, going back into dating, we talk about a dating brand. And it's like, I don't want your dating brand to be hardworking mama. Right. And there's not like, we could do better than that. You're better than that. You're multidimensional. Let's get in touch with that feminine side. Not in a way that makes you, it is going to make you vulnerable, but considering my audience, I want to be very careful about the word vulnerable, but a healthy vulnerability that allows you to open yourself up.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And that's such a great distinction, because there's vulnerable where we're weak and vulnerable to prey, to being, to predators. And then there's like the openness, the suppleness that comes from just being receptive. Maybe receptive is a better word.
I like that. Yeah. And the way I describe it is like, I want you to be able to open the door, but then if it's not a fit, you need to close the door. But don't always have the door closed, because there's wonderful people out there. Open it, just kind of crack it. Don't swing it all the way open and let anybody in who wants to go.
I love it.
Just like crack it a little way.
Come a little closer. Yeah.
Because that is scary, right? If you've been hurt, as it is scary. But when you kind of think about, you just got to crack the door. Don't have to swing it wide open, or don't swing it wide open. Some people are just like swinging it open just so anyone will come in.
Right. And that's where in my experience, like, it comes into the way that we relate to relationship influences who we're going to let through that door. And for all of us, I call it our intimacy model. We were all programmed by the model for intimacy that we saw growing up, based on what our caretakers, our society, the culture we grew up in, our peers, our siblings, based on what was being modeled in our home. We saw certain things happening, and there were messages that we received. And for most of us, we're either replicating or rebelling against what we saw, right? Like,
let me just say that again. That was really good. Replicating or rebelling against, right? Think about how we're raising our kids. Think about how we're doing relationships. You're either replicating or rebelling, and there is a middle. So much of our conversation has been about coming to that middle.
Yes.
Right?
And almost like wiping this, like going back in and like erasing the slate, for the stuff that doesn't work.
Or washing the dirt off.
Washing the dirt off, turning the light on, walking in the dark room. I kind of think of it as going into, like, with our relationship histories, it's like going into a closet and taking some boxes off the shelf, looking around what's in there, and looking at how it's still impacting our current life. And then we want to shine some light on it, because if it's still, if it's causing us not want to opening the door, to another person, if we've been single for 20 or 30 years, but we really want partnership, or we've been divorced 5 times and we don't trust ourselves to not repeat it again. It's like, we want to look at what's in there, but with gentleness, with acceptance, and give ourselves permission to have a whole new experience. Because we're not bound. We are not bound. Thank God we are not bound by the past.
I love that. Okay, so if there's a woman and she is like, oh, I'm bringing the representative into the dates. I'm not really, I'm successful at work, successful in other areas, but on dates and my romantic relationships, I'm just people pleasing, kind of doing what they want, not comfortable. What advice do you have to her?
The first one would be just to start being aware of it. Just to start being aware. The more that we can have this, the more something becomes objective instead of subjective, then it's no longer in me. So just simply by setting the intention to notice, am I leading with the representative, as you call it? Am I stepping outside of myself? Am I saying or agreeing or doing things that really don't match me? So just
knowing what matches you.
And
right?
that's like the second part, right? So the first one
Oh.
would be awareness is curative. So just
Yeah.
even seeing this thing that I'm doing.
Uh-huh.
And then when we notice the things that we're doing that aren't aligned or truthful or
Mhm.
accurate, then, right, it's like, well, what is the deeper truth? What do I
Yeah.
actually want here?
Mhm.
You know, how do I want to be wined and dined on a date? What am
Mhm.
I comfortable with when it comes to physical intimacy or financial transactions when I'm
Mhm.
dating, or speaking about what we're looking for, you know, playing it cool, or actually saying we're looking for long-term relationship. So by noticing what we're doing, having that
Mhm.
awareness, then that leads us in the direction of self-reflection,
Mhm.
to then
Mhm.
reflect on, well, what is true for me? You know,
Mhm.
if there was no concern, if I didn't have any filter or any worry, what would I actually, what is true for me? What would I most love?
Okay, that's huge. Okay,
It's
so
huge.
yeah. So there's the filter of the fear. We'll call
Hmm.
it the fear filter.
Hmm.
Okay. So if the fear filter was gone,
Yeah.
then what would you want?
Right. And to just even creatively brainstorm
Uh-huh.
outside of the box of the fear filter
Yeah.
starts opening up not only the neuronal pathways, but it starts creating. So we've got neurobiology that we're bringing into our favor. Psychologically, it's starting to mock up and create new imprints inside of us, because we all have these different parts of us that come alive in different circumstances. And so it's starting to even create inner territory psychologically of this one that then we have the opportunity to live into. Like if I could have it all my way, if there were no rules, no fear filter, what would feel really good to my heart?
And what you're, in the simplest terms, you're talking about daydreaming and opening
Yeah,
yourself up to those
yeah.
possibilities
I call
again.
it like
Yeah.
visioning, like I exactly visioning, daydreaming,
Yeah.
just giving
Yeah.
permission to dream beyond what we've known.
And it's in my own life, right? I struggled with that
Mhm.
so much,
Yeah.
and it was just like, oh, if I dream,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
is, I'm not successful, I'll feel like a failure or something like that.
Yeah, or
So
the disappointment, or I know, I
yes,
know.
yes. I do want to, like, if anybody's listening to this. So I ended up calling a huge life coaching company when I was starting this journey, and they were like, "Oh, what are your goals?" And I was just like, maybe have like 3 clients and keep my current job, and this. They were like, okay. So what is your, they kind of called me on it, and they said something. Basically, they said, "You've gotten so good at making the best of a bad situation
Mm,
that you've forgotten how to make the most of your life."
beautiful.
Oh, I just wept for like 3
Mhm.
days, and then
Mm,
hired a business coach, put
mm,
a third of my salary on a credit
mm.
card, and off we go,
There
and it
you
was
go.
just
Yep.
so impactful for me. And I was
Mhm.
just like, you're right. Like, you're dead
Mm,
on.
mm,
And so that was the
mhm,
scary fear filter in my own life,
yeah.
and removing that. And then it was also obviously a process, of like then imagining things and then imagining things. But if anybody thinks, wow, that's really scary. Yes, it
Yeah,
is.
it is,
Okay.
right? Like it is. Like don't,
Yes.
and like don't let that stop us, right?
Yes.
Like because
Yes.
yeah, it's almost like fear, that threshold of fear, it's always a required threshold to walk through. I don't know why, it just is.
It is. And it's such
Mhm,
an important point. And so if
mhm,
you're like, oh, I don't want to date, or,
mhm,
or I don't want to get rid of the wrong person, right? I
mhm,
mean, both of
mhm.
those have that fear filter
Yeah,
attached to it,
yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, tell people where they can find more about you and your
Oh,
lovely work. Yes.
well, you can always find me on my website, GabriellaTaylor.com, and my company is Extraordinary Love, and I create transformational educational programs for women. So I have wonderful, in-depth, intimate group programs where I love walking women through, especially my Foundations of Extraordinary Love program, which you can find at foundationsofextraordinarylove.com. It's the program where we recreate a whole new model for relationship. And to me, it's one of my babies. I've spent 15 years developing the curriculum on it, and I just really love it. So you can find me there, and I am here.
Give her a Google. Thank you so much for coming on here to help us on our journey to become toxic person proof.
Awesome.